May the words of my mouth and the meditation of our hearts be always acceptable in your sight, O Lord, our strength and our Redeemer. Amen. Well, good morning. It is good to be here with you all this morning. I heard that there were announcements going on right before the service, but I was back in the back with the choir. So just in case you missed it, my name is Joshua Varner. I am the Canon for Children and Youth for the Diocese of Georgia, which means that I live in Savannah and I have some responsibility for, or a lot of responsibility for, diocesan youth programs, many of which take place at Honey Creek, although not all. And the other piece that I get to do is travel around the diocese and be at different congregations at worship, usually on Sunday mornings. And that really is, for me, a privilege. If you ever ask Cindy, when she gets back, one of the things that she may tell you is that she hardly ever gets to see how another congregation worships because she's kind of got a Sunday morning gig that she has to be at. So it really is, most clergy don't get to see a lot of different congregations. So it is a privilege to get to be with you all this morning. Thank you very much. This is one of the readings. This reading from the Gospel of Matthew is one of the most famous pieces of the New Testament, with the possible exception of the Lord's Prayer itself. This teaching that Jesus gives, blessed, commonly called the Beatitudes. Blessed are the poor in spirit. Blessed are those who mourn. Blessed are the meek. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness. Blessed, blessed, blessed. He goes on and on with this. And it got me started thinking a little bit about what it means to be blessed. We tend to say it blessed when we're reading it in this context, but usually if you see that word, you would say blessed. So what does that mean, to be blessed? And I went and looked up some of the old etymology of the word, and it has to do with hallowing, holy, with marking something as holy, or noting that it is holy and remembering that. One of the famous stories in the Old Testament that we didn't hear this morning is the one where Jacob wrestles with the angel, and then another one where Jacob sees the ladder going up and down from earth to heaven, and that's where we get the song "We Are Climbing Jacob's Ladder." It's from that particular story. But he wakes up after this dream, and he says, "This is the house of God. Surely God is in this place, and I didn't know it." And then he builds an altar right on the spot to mark this place as holy. This is one of the things that the people in the Old Testament particularly, you'll see this happens over and over again. They go and they travel somewhere, and God is there, and so they build an altar. They mark the spot as holy. And then they go and they travel somewhere else, and it turns out God's over there too. And so they build another altar, and they mark that spot as holy. In the Celtic tradition today, a lot of times you'll see, if you travel in particular parts of the world, you'll see stacks of rocks that are just on the ground. There's nothing around them. There's not any writing or any carving. It's just a stack of rocks. It's called a cairn. And often, although not always, but often those are built to mark a spot that is particularly holy to someone, something, some place that is blessed or blessed. Now, the challenge comes because it is a very short step from noticing something holy and marking that to deciding that this particular place ought to be holy. What I mean by that is oftentimes we assume that a particular thing is blessed without actually paying attention to God. And we take things that we want and we reinterpret those as signs of God's blessing. So we say, well, I want to have lots and lots of money. And maybe I work hard, and maybe I just get lucky in the lottery, or maybe something else happens, and I get a lot of money. And so I say to myself, wow, I must be blessed because I got what I wanted. Or sometimes something else happens that we really want, and we interpret that as, oh, God must like me. I'm blessed. Here's the trouble with that. Because if I assume that, we'll just take money for the example right now. If I assume that me getting money means that I'm blessed, and you don't have money, well, that must mean God doesn't like you very much. And that means it's okay for me to do anything I want to you because God doesn't like you anyway. And that is the way that Christians have justified all sorts of oppression of other people for the last 2 millennia. We've said, well, God must not like you, so it's okay for us to do bad stuff to you. That's the danger in assuming that we know what blessing looks like. Blessing is the presence of God, but we don't always know what that is. And so we have to be open to all these things that are actually quite counterintuitive in many ways. If you look at Jesus' list of all of those blessings, think about, just for a second, think about what he says. Blessed are the poor in spirit. Well, most of us would say that being poor in any form is not much of a blessing. But he's saying, yes, it is. To know that you are dependent on other people, to know that you need others in your life, that there is something that you don't have that you need, that you're not enough by yourself, that's a blessing. Now, turn that around and think about what our American culture tells us, which is that you ought to be able to do everything by yourself, that you shouldn't need anybody else, that really we all ought to be self-made people. That's not poor in spirit, but that's what our culture would tell us is a success. Jesus is saying, no, blessed are the poor in spirit. And then he says, blessed are those who mourn. Well, who wants to mourn? I'd rather be happy. I mean, most parents, if you ask them, what would you like for your children? They'll say, well, I want them to grow up and be happy. And I would like that for my children too. But Jesus is saying, blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. And he goes on, blessed are the meek, not the ones who are powerful, not the ones who win all the time, the meek. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness. Not for success, not for victory, not for wealth, for righteousness. And he keeps on going. Blessed are the pure in heart. Blessed are the peacemakers. You know, we like peacemakers from afar. We like Dr. King and we like Gandhi. But you know, when they get in our face and start telling us what we're doing wrong and how we're contributing to war in the world, we really don't like them so much anymore. And Jesus is saying, blessed are those people who don't fight, who don't want to win all the time, because it's more important to make peace. And then he keeps on going, because it's not just all about peace. Blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, who are willing to do what's right, even when it means that something bad is going to happen to them. People who are willing to stand up. I was marching in the Savannah parade for Martin Luther King Day just a couple weekends ago, and we were thinking, and I was thinking about how, you know, we do this now, and we don't really think much about the fact that marching, not that long ago, only a few decades, for equal rights for people whose skin tone is darker than mine, was a massive act of nonviolent rebellion. And it was people being persecuted for righteousness' sake. And they were blessed. The Spirit of God, the presence of God was in all of these counterintuitive things. All of them. And so, one of the things then, for me, with all of these, is to remember that I don't always know what blessing looks like. Jesus lists all these things that are not what my culture tells me blessing is. But he's not saying that's the exclusive list. I work a lot with children, and one of the things I'm going to be doing after the service today is doing a brief, or not so brief, but an introduction to a type of storytelling and a type of learning called godly play. And I've been doing this for about 15 years or so now. And one of the things that I love about it is that it assumes that children are already a source of blessing in themselves. They are blessed, not because of anything I can teach them, but because of their own innate relationship to God. And I had a friend of mine one time who was telling a story in Godly Play, and she was telling a story of Jesus entering Jerusalem during the Passover week, the Palm Sunday story. And Jesus is riding on a donkey, and everybody's saying, Hosanna. And this young person, maybe 4 or 5, kind of looked at the pieces, and they were talking about the story, and he said, well, Jesus rode on a donkey to die. And then he stopped for a minute, and he said, he rode on a donkey to be born, and he rode on a donkey to die. I don't know exactly how old this child was, probably 6. And it had been at least 3 months since he had heard the story of Mary riding the donkey into Bethlehem. And it wasn't like we'd gone back and forth and said, hey, everybody make sure that you connect Christmas and Easter together. He just did this all on his own. And it was the sort of thing where you realize that the presence of God was in this place, in this moment, even if we did not already know it. So for us, we make space for that. Sometimes we make space by having moments of silence. Sometimes we make space by being open to what there is around us in the world, to the blessings that we may not notice. We slow down a little bit, just a little bit. Because when we're so busy, it's so much easier to miss all the things that are outside of our expectations. And so one of the ways that we do this, I think, is through music and through poetry and through ways that we get beyond our own brains. So I'm going to finish today with a little bit of a song. This is a particular poet's recasting of the blessings of Jesus, the Beatitudes. And so I'm going to read you the way he recast them. They're the same ones. The order's a little bit different, but you could draw a connection from one to the other. But they go like this. I'm going to read it first, and then I'm just going to sing it for you. Blessed are those who know their need, for theirs is the grace of heaven. Blessed are those who weep, for their tears will be wiped away. Blessed are the humble, for they are close to the sacred earth. Blessed are those who hunger for earth's oneness, for they will be satisfied. Blessed are the forgiving, for they are free. Blessed are the clear in heart, for they see the living presence. Blessed are those who suffer for what is right, for theirs is the strength of heaven. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they are born of God. So I just invite you to listen a little bit, and then we'll take just a moment before we begin the Nicene Creed in silence. Blessed are those who know their need, for theirs is the grace of heaven. Blessed are those who weep, for their tears will be wiped away. Blessed are the humble, for they are close to the sacred earth. Blessed are those who hunger for earth's oneness, for they will be satisfied. Blessed are the forgiving, for they are free. Blessed are the clear in heart, for they see the living presence. Blessed are those who suffer for what is right, for theirs is the strength of heaven. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they are born